Good evening. This is a call to order of the Aspen City Council regular meeting for May 28th, 2024. Could we have a roll call for attendance, please?
Councilor Doyle?
Here.
Councilor Guth?
Here.
Councilor Howenstein? Councilor Rose?
Here.
Mayor Tory?
Here as well. This evening, we have not a scheduled public appearance, but we do have a proclamation this evening. This is a proclamation of the City of Aspen, Colorado, incorporated in 1881, whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska and is now observed throughout the nation and the world. And whereas trees reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other products. And whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, beautify our community, and are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. And whereas the City of Aspen has been recognized as a Tree City USA by the National Arbor Day Foundation. Now, therefore, let it be resolved that the Mayor, City Council, and the citizens of Aspen hereby proclaim June 8th, 2024 as Arbor Day in the City of Aspen, and we urge all citizens to support effort to care for our trees, our woodlands, and to support our city's community forestry program for this and future generations. Round of applause for trees. Let's see, Arbor Day is the 8th, that Saturday. So we are having our Arbor Day celebration in Pepke Park on Arbor Day this year, the 8th. There are a lot of fun things for the community to do, and of course it is the annual tree giveaway as well. So keep your eyes on your newspapers and your social media to remind yourself Saturday the 8th in the morning. I think it starts maybe at 9. Thank you. And this brings us on our agenda to citizens' comments and petitions. Are there any members of the public that wish to address council on items not scheduled for a public hearing? And we ask that you keep your comments to about 3 minutes so that everybody has a fair and equal opportunity to speak. Any members of the public in room? Come on up. Sit right there in the middle, if you will.
Hello, everybody.
I think those are green. There's a light at the bottom of the, yep. If those are green, they're on.
So my name's Harry Graham. Good evening. I've been a resident of Aspen and Roaring Fork Valley for 6 years now, and I'm here representing Oliver Smith Jeweler, located at 400 East Hyman. I want to first thank you for your time and service to our community. I'm here today to bring to your attention an issue that has significantly impacted not only my business, but also the well-being of the surrounding area. For the past 9 to 12 months, we have observed between 1 and 6 transients occupying the benches near our establishment daily. These individuals engage in behaviors such as panhandling, drinking, smoking marijuana and cigarettes. They've even urinated on our back door and made inappropriate comments to passers-by, including catcalling and harassment for money. Despite our repeated efforts to handle the situation respectfully and empathetically, the persistent presence of these individuals has created an untenable environment. We have spoken to the transients weekly, trying to address the situation calmly. However, our employees and clients continue to face harassment and discomfort. We have reported these incidents to the police, even providing video evidence of the harassment. While the police have been supportive and understanding, they are limited in their ability to act due to the lack of proper laws and enforcement mechanisms in place. The impact on our business has been severe. This ongoing issue has led to a decline in our sales as potential customers avoid our location due to the uncomfortable and unsafe atmosphere. Our employees feel threatened, and some staff members no longer feel safe interacting with these individuals. We have also noticed passers-by crossing the street to avoid our building because of the constant presence of the transients. We understand and empathize with the complexities of the homelessness. However, the current situation is unsustainable for our business and the community. We propose the following immediate actions to mitigate the problem. One, remove the benches. Until appropriate laws and enforcement measures are in place, we request the immediate removal of the 2 benches facing each other on Mill Street outside of our building at 400 East Hyman. This action will help deter group loitering and the associated disruptive behavior that is currently rampant. 2, enforce panhandling laws. We urge the city to establish and enforce laws specifically addressing aggressive panhandling and loitering. This will ensure that our business district remains safe and welcome for all. 3, remove signage. The transients often display signs, which is against the city's permitting rules. We seek fair enforcement of these regulations akin to the permissions we must obtain for our business signage. We are committed to collaborating with the city and the police department to find ethical solutions that respect the rights and dignity of all individuals involved while effectively addressing the issue. Other businesses such as Roots RX, Mystics, Van Cleef, D'Angelico are building owners in the area, and they share common concerns. Their signatures are attached if you would like to see those. Thank you for your attention to this matter. I know your time is valuable, but I wanted to press how important the removal of the 2 benches outside of 400 East Hyman is for the community. We look forward to working together.
Thanks, Harry. Can I ask a question? Thanks for coming. You talked about some signs that you would like removed. Could you expand on that? What kind of signs are being
Just the
placed?
signs they make, anything helps,
Panhandling
asking for
signs.
money, the panhandling signs. Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Kate, legal questions for you?
Yeah.
There's reference in there to panhandling and loitering laws and signage. Can you comment to us about what we do have on the books for panhandling or loitering, as well as that signage? Are those acts in violation of any of our current city codes?
With respect to the signage, a lot is. Yes, Mayor, with respect to the signage, I just want to be careful. There are some First Amendment issues. A lot would depend on what that signage says, whether or not it violates any aspect of our municipal code. I haven't looked at our municipal statutes that relates to panhandling. There are some statutes there are some municipal codes that prohibit, for instance, selling things in the public right-of-way with the exception of the farmer's market and things like that. But I will say from a First Amendment perspective, again, without knowing exactly what these signs say, I can't really comment on whether or not it would be a per se violation of our municipal code.
Okay.
I did look at those recently, and there are pretty clear municipal code rules against panhandling.
There are.
And what I would say with that is that we would want to review enforceability given some constitutional complaints around prohibiting. We have 31 municipalities just here in Colorado that have been sued in the last 5 years regarding their panhandling laws for enforcing them.
I don't know if you have an answer now, but what would it take to remove or move those benches? Thinking about town, they're kind of unique as far as benches go, as far as facing each other in proximity to a business. What would it take to move those or remove those?
You all can just direct me to do that.
Direct you.
Administratively, I'd be just hesitant to do that because those were donated. I can't remember by whom. Who's read the bench plaque lately?
Welch's.
The Welch's, yeah. So, if we can contact a member of the Welch's to speak with them about the situation and have them be a collaborator and possible other ways of serving the purpose. The Welch's actually wanted those benches placed facing each other when they made the donation. So we'd want to converse with them, but you can just direct me to have them removed or relocated.
Personally, I think conversing with them would definitely be the move to do it before moving or removing, and I'm thinking more moving. Anecdotally, I do feel like I've almost only seen transients on those benches and never anyone other than that, but I'm only there so often. So, can I ask for direction to contact the Welch's, or is that something that we should do?
No, staff can reach out to the Welch's. I believe Susan is around. I'll have to double check. That's the first one who comes to mind to me is Susan Welch. But we'll follow up on our records. I'm just looking at Austin. Do you have the records most likely? Yeah, so we could just reach out and discuss with them and see if they're willing to explore some options and what might be any kind of donation agreement associated with the placement of the benches.
And then get back to us via email or info packet, or?
Yeah, yes is the short answer. I may still need direction from the council table. I don't want to take that off of possible next steps.
Great.
Please do, and I'd also like to request that we revisit the conversation about municipal law changes that was supposed to be part of an executive session that didn't end up happening. So I think that's important, and I don't want that to go to the wayside. Do I have everyone's support to get that scheduled?
I can't support that at this time because our city attorney requested to discuss those items in executive session, and we didn't allow that. So if you want to schedule it for executive session so that our city attorney has the opportunity to give his legal advice, then yes, I'm happy to schedule that.
If it's appropriate to have that conversation in executive session, I'm okay with that.
Then I would support that.
So we can go ahead and schedule that on June 4th at your next regular meeting. Our information's all been pretty much ready to go.
All right.
Thanks.
We don't need prep time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Supported the first time.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks. I'm ready. Thanks again, Harry.
Yeah, thank you for coming in.
Can I do anything with these signatures, or you don't need to see them?
You
Yeah,
can
leave it with
share
Mike,
the city
please.
clerk.
Thank you.
Other members of the public for public comment this evening? Rachel?
You ever seen non-transient?
Never.
Oh, yes, sir. Sir.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's
forget
towards
your
front door.
I trust your judgment on this. I only walk by every so often. So,
A lot less these days.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, when they smell like piss all the time.
Hi.
Thank you all for your time this evening, and I'm looking forward to a good summer. I hope we're nice and busy. Sorry about that. Thank you all for your time this evening. I know you have a lot on your plates, a lot going on, and we're going into a busy summer season. You know, I've lived here over 40 years, and I've always bragged about our community and the many, many accomplishments we've made, past councils, current councils, affordable housing, childcare, trails, recycling, electrification, great walking and bike trails, a real pedestrian orientation. So it's been extremely disappointing to see the minority of this council, the leadership, abandoning our climate goals, clean air goals, and desire for reduced emissions, reduced single occupancy vehicle traffic. I've never quite seen a council or a county commission try to spend the money to avoid doing an environmental impact statement and to say, we want to build a large project, and it's going to affect a lot of new neighbors who always thought that highway wasn't going to be there, and not know the capacity, the air quality, how it affects RAFTA. I read through the memo too, and it didn't ask a single question of the consultants of, will this get more people on transit? And will we protect our air quality? You know, $40,000 was spent on the Aspen Institute mobility study, which the city funded, the county funded, and others. And there's not a lick of it showing up in where council's direction is for this. There's no HOV enforcement. That was declined to pay for out of general funds when we couldn't use the half penny. And there's no congestion pricing being built into it. So it's really disappointing to see Aspen, formerly at the forefront of the environmental movement, now looking to spend $600,000 to say, how do we not get this built without analyzing the impacts, the capacity, the mobility, or what it'll do. It sounds like the oil drillers I used to see in the Thompson Divide who said, hey, that old EIS is no good, we don't even need it anymore, and they started drilling without it. So I think time is wasting, and the bridge is deteriorating daily. And I'll say one last other thing. There's something known as a hold harmless agreement that you generally get with the CDOT or Transportation Department of Federal Highway Administration. And that hold harmless means that's money you spend studying a given project can be later counted as part of your local match for your grant. Unless they're agreeing that the work is suitable and is done independently and is not biased, you're not going to get a hold harmless agreement for that money that we're spending of $600,000. And I'd really like to see the Mill Street Bridge and all the potholes in town fixed first before pursuing this fanciful idea that is not going to be built without an EIS. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the public for public comment this evening? Online as well? I don't see any hands raised, and I'll bring it back to council table then. Council member comments this evening? John?
Yeah, I'm going to start with some environmental news. From the New York Times, the summer of 2023 was exceptionally hot. Scientists had already established that it was the warmest northern hemisphere summer since around 1850. But they've since discovered it's been the hottest in 2,000 years, according to a new study published in the journal Nature. The climate crisis threatens the very future of the planet. The last 10 years have been the 10 warmest years on record. 2023 was by far the hottest year in recorded history, and 2024 is on track to be even hotter. Unless there's a huge reduction in carbon emissions, we will continue to see more drought, more flooding, more forest fires, more extreme weather disturbances, more mass migrations, and more deaths as a result of the climate crisis. Also, last week, Venezuela's last glacier has disappeared due to climate change. Rising temperatures made this country the first in modern history to lose every one of its glaciers. And lastly, economic damage from climate change is 6 times worse than thought. Economic damage wrought by climate change, with global heating set to shrink wealth at a rate consistent with the level of financial losses of a continuing permanent war. A 1 degree centigrade increase in global temperatures leads to a 12% decline in world gross domestic product. The researchers found a far higher estimate than that of previous analyses. And these stories just illustrate why this city council and the previous one have continued to try to push Aspen to be at the forefront of dealing with the climate crisis, but we can only work on it locally. And that's why we have instituted Building IQ. That's why we have the best public transit system for our size in the nation, and along with water conservation and all the other initiatives that we've enacted over the years. So I hope we can continue to push Aspen in this positive direction, because we have a lot of work to do. Thanks.
Thanks, John.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, in no particular order, I just wanted to, this time of year, warn people not to go into Devil's Punch Bowl before the 4th of July. I feel like we have a death every single year this time of year between now and the 4th of July, and 4th's not a hard date, but just make sure it's actually safe before you go into a place like that, especially as Independence Pass opens on June 1st. The next thing I wanted to ask was, Sarah, I was wondering, the timeline on the lumberyard RFQ, it ends at the end of this month, and then I just wanted to ask, when is the RFP supposed to be potentially issued, and when would be a good time for council to give some input on an RFP as far as things that we might be looking for to prioritize?
Do you have other comments while I pull up my notes?
Yes.
Great.
So I'll go to those. The next one also inquires a staff member as far as, I saw Pete earlier, I don't know if he's in here, but I was gonna ask about the food tax refund and how many people participated in the money given out.
That's scheduled for June 10th.
It's
Come
a
back to
review on
council
it.
with
I just know, he actually gave me those numbers, but I was just looking for that publicly. It'll happen on June 10th. And then, so many different things. Sarah was also gonna ask, when it comes to the preferred alternative and the legal advice question, should I wait until the consent calendar, or can I make that motion now if someone would be appropriate about it?
That's certainly council's pleasure, but I think probably your other counselors would need a little more context.
I was gonna add context after I knew whether now or later made the most sense. It's up to me.
I would defer to the mayor as the chair of the meeting.
I'll
Alright,
provide
accept a
context before you
motion now.
answer, but it's still uncertain to me whether a vote is required for the preferred alternative. I've talked to Sarah, and it said that CDOT doesn't think a vote is required. Jim thinks a vote is required, and the motion that I want to make is for a written opinion of legal advice, asking Jim to write a written opinion of legal advice as to whether a vote is needed to go ahead with a preferred alternative. And I know it's on the consent calendar, but that's just, usually motions aren't made during consent calendar.
We have, we've made that request, and we were awaiting that to return.
Well,
And so Sam is saying, can we get it, and can we get it in writing?
Yeah, that's the feedback I've gotten. Sorry, I should have added that. It's been spoken to me that they prefer to do it in a motion and also like a legal request, so that it comes back to us in a confidential manner, at least from informal writing.
I think some clarity to my office would be appreciated. I understand you may, each of you individually or even as a board may have had conversations with Jim, but I just want to be sure. I think what I'm hearing is there's a desire, at least from one council member, probably more, for a request for a formal legal opinion as to whether a vote is needed to proceed with the alternatives that have been proposed. If there is a majority of you that would like to see a legal opinion, my office is happy to prepare that.
Alternatives to be proposed is like to go through the Merle open space. What the current preferred alternative states, I still feel like I've heard mixed messaging as whether a vote is even needed to do that. Like, even if this council said, let's do the preferred alternative, would a vote need to be taking place by this community? I've never heard a solid answer on that.
So,
So you're looking for the scenario of the preferred alternative from the record of decision?
Yes.
And for other alternatives the council may wish to explore?
Yeah, I would open it up to both those things just to understand what we're up against, because we talk about all this stuff and then we could make a decision and find out a community-wide vote is needed, whether we want it or not. And I think that's kind of a funny path to go down without knowing that for sure. So if you want me to make a formal motion, or if you accept.
I would like to understand if there's a
Yeah.
majority on the board that want that legal opinion.
Yes, from me.
Do you want it in motion form or just
I
an
don't
answer?
think we needed a motion for him.
Yes,
I think you
yes.
can request that of your city attorney's office without a motion.
Then yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And the timeline that, so we can expect that in like a confidential email back, or?
Will be
I think we'll wait until it's written.
Yeah.
And the city attorney may have some choices about how it's delivered that he thinks is important. I'd like to reserve that option for him, please.
Okay, sounds good. The other thing I wanted to ask, long list tonight, reading all about all the different House and Senate bills, and I was trying to research this. If you're familiar, might not know the answer now, but Senate Bill 2 allows tax breaks for long-term renters versus short-term renters, and I'm sure the city is well aware of that. I was more or less wondering if the city, A, was aware of that, and B, how that could potentially apply to Aspen and how we could make that work for our long-term rental.
Sure, I'm just taking a quick look at Jen to double check that, because the General Assembly for Colorado has closed session. So there's no more bills advancing right now. This was quite a debated topic, and it was about STRs, quote unquote, paying their way because of the commercial demand they create, and separating that from longer term residential quarters.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I don't actually have that information, but I'm happy to send it to you. And I do know that our Bowditch and Castle was planning to send kind of a recap of the whole session, but I don't have it from them yet.
Yeah, I didn't email you before, and while you're sitting here, I was gonna say this later in the meeting, but House Bill 1237 is childcare facility money. Reading about that, and I was wondering if that would apply to something on our agenda later tonight, talking about Burlingame.
Maybe is the answer.
Yeah,
Because it's still, even after the Senate passes it, has to go through some rulemaking process that would be required for us to know for sure. So we continue, though, to talk with the state and with our federal legislative delegation about the need for additional capital dollars for childcare here in the Valley. So trust me, we will overturn every stone, seeing if we can track down additional funds to support that.
I believe it. Just wanted to bring those up. I know you're the expert on all the different things going on at the State House. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Do you want me to answer his lumberyard question now or later, Mr. Mayor?
If you have it.
Remember.
Yeah. So the lumberyard's scheduled to come back in work session on July 8th.
July
And
8th.
yeah, so on July 8th, we're gonna, the RFQs are due this week.
Yeah.
And so that will give us a chance to come back to you, tell you a bit about, at a high level, what we're seeing in those RFQs and how that process is advancing. We were not gonna have a recommendation on July 8th. That's a little quick for evaluation of such substantial amount of information. So that is an appropriate time to start that conversation about RFQs, the RFP, and what council might be interested in having in it. From a staff perspective, we've already been working on base bid and bid alternatives that we might want to include. That all still is in a work in progress. It's so it's a little lengthy of a list right now, what potential alternatives we would accept. Or if we're going to do more of a catch-all of, if you have another idea, propose it to us, or if we're going to ask for specific alternatives be included in a RFP to be considered responsive to the RFP. So
we'll get a chance to talk about July 8th before any RFP is issued.
yeah, there's no way, we have to get through the RFQ process to issue the RFP because it will be invited bidders. For the RFP through the RFQ process. So we're working with people we believe are qualified and capable of performing the work, or at least have demonstrated the likelihood of being able to do that. But we're still behind the scenes, have to work on writing the RFP at the same time. It's just the work product is very much in draft form, but we meet on it somewhat regularly. About the lumberyard and all, including the RFQ and RFP processes.
Apologies for this, but I just want to ask it one more way, and that is like, and this is just a hypothetical, but if the council directed and said, we want to prioritize a private partner that's willing to build it in one phase.
That's already an alternate bid that we have, like, so we'll consider speed to delivery as an evaluation criteria. That's a pretty common evaluation criteria in these type of RFPs.
But that's not something the council can say, we definitely want that to be
No, trust me,
prioritized.
we want that too, at the staff level. We think that's what the community expectation is delivery more quickly, without sacrificing quality.
Of course.
But that's the kind of thing we would normally have built in as a, you tell us, would you prefer to build this all at once? Would you prefer phases? If so, these are the phases we're willing to accept, because that's tied back to entitlement. So that would be common practice for staff.
And those are maybe some of the questions you might ask on July 8th of us during a work session? Or not like that question, but like probing questions about like prioritization from an RFP to get like the product that we're all hopefully looking for.
I think we'll have some questions. It's probably premature for me to guess what they are. But we're happy to accept feedback on what are things that are important to the council and considering that, those responses and how they're evaluated. We'll work within the confines of the procurement ordinance, though, in anything we bring forward.
Thank you.
Just one thing from me tonight. Elizabeth Milius brought to our attention the methodology that the Pickens County assessor has used for as long as anyone can remember to assess real estate taxes on deed restricted property in Aspen and Pickens County. And I'm supportive of the assessor evaluating ways to more equitably assess those taxes. What's happening right now potentially is not conforming to state law. I have not solicited our attorney's legal opinion on that, but that's why I say potentially. And I just wanted to express my support for the assessor looking into this, reevaluating it, and I'd like to make sure that we can provide direction to APSHA to provide the support and the resources necessary to the assessor's office to reevaluate that approach and make sure that it conforms with law and is equitable for all members in the community. So I ask each of you, are you?
I want
okay with-
information. I'd like the information. I tried to go through some of that material, and I don't understand a couple of different facets of it. What state law and what methodology, where those are controverted for each other, as well as our jurisdiction over talking to the county assessor about her methodology. So before Jim left for this week of work that he's doing, I asked him for a little bit of more information around that. So at this time, I'm open to the conversation, but I just don't know what that conversation is. As far as APSHA, APSHA doesn't have a big role in the evaluation or the assessor's work that goes on there. But like I said, I just need more information before I even really know where to start with this at all.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And to be clear, I don't really want to get involved in evaluating whether the current approach is appropriate or a revised approach needs to be done. What I want to do is express my support very clearly for the assessor in determining whether the approach is appropriate or whether there's a new approach that should be implemented, and making sure that the assessor's office has the resources and the support of APSHA to do so and to evaluate that. That's my only request. I really don't want to spend my time evaluating that and making the decision on it. It's not our decision to make, so I don't believe.
Sarah?
Yeah, just for some clarity, APSHA's role is to provide the maximum resale value to the assessor's office. And everything from that process on is the responsibility of the assessor and her team. So I want to be clear that the methodology for APSHA has not changed. It has continued to be maximum resale value of the property if it were to be sold under the deed restriction guidelines. So from that end, there's not a whole lot for APSHA else to do because they're saying this is the maximum value. How the assessor's office chooses to apply state statute to properties is definitely within the assessor's domain. And so I just want to provide clarity on that. And this is all coming about because of a Senate bill. So this is a state regulatory environment dictating an exemption process for the first $55,000 of retail value, of real estate value. And I don't know that the assessor actually has the authority to bypass state statute in applying that. And so I certainly would defer to the county and the county attorney's office and the county assessor to provide that. But at this point, she hasn't provided any statements regarding the matter publicly.
Yeah, I understood on all. Thanks for the clarity. Again, I'm not saying that I think that the current approach is wrong or right. It just, there's a valid concern there, I think, and the assessor wants to evaluate it. And APSHA is the keeper of a lot of the data that is necessary for the assessor's office to evaluate this appropriately. So what I am asking for is support for APSHA to share the resources that are necessary for the assessor to evaluate the situation, nothing more.
And the two county commissioners that are on the APSHA board are advocates for the county's needs, including the assessors. So certainly would take seriously any requests that they brought forward. At this point, there's not actually a phone call into one of them, their voting member, to get some clarity on if they had other expectations. Because most of the other real estate information is already contained with the assessor regarding unit size, bedroom count, finished and unfinished spaces. So if there's additional information need, we'd want to hear that from the assessor's office of where they think their data set is incomplete for her to be able to perform her office's functions.
Yeah, for me, Bill, I mean, obviously, I want us to be working with the assessor's office as much as we can. I don't know what those lines and boundaries are. I would be happy to reach out personally to Deb and ask her what's going on and what she might need and that kind of thing. But I think that ultimately, this is a question that belongs at the APSHA board. And given some of the conversations we just had like a week ago, I want to be careful about what directives we are giving from this table to APSHA without including APSHA in that. So
I appreciate
I
that.
support your sentiment, and if you give me maybe a little bit of time to get some more information, talk to Deb perhaps, and then we can get this to APSHA to let them know that the city council does support them in working with the office.
If I may, Mayor, I
Yes.
just want to clarify, I think the term methodology and formula has been sort of used here tonight. Tax assessment, and that is what the assessor is tasked with solely, it's their responsibility, you have no oversight over the assessor, let's be clear about that, is governed extensively by state law, and it is an extensive set of statutes that dictates uniform assessment across the state. So what I think Ms. Milius was pointing out was some questions as to whether or not the assessor was following state law when assessing certain properties within the city of Aspen. The assessor's office has the ability to request information. They can do so, but again, that's solely their prerogative. It's not anything that most property owners, private property owners, offer. They respond to requests by assessors when they're engaged in this assessment process. I would caution this council in interfering in that process at all. I understand there's been questions raised, but the person who has the authority to answer those questions is solely the assessor. As a council, you can certainly encourage the assessor to address these issues, but again, I would sort of caution you from engaging with both APSHA or the assessors in how they do their processes with assessment. So.
Fair enough. Again, I wanted to bring it up. I think it's something that warrants a look. I know that it was important to Deb to know that she had some support from both the county commissioners and the city council in evaluating it, and I'm expressing that support.
Thanks, Bill.
That's it for me.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you. Comments for me this evening. I have a couple of items. First, I want to mention to the community that the Aspen Police Department bike auction is approaching. The police department's annual bike auction will take place Friday, May 31st. And it will be held in front of the Aspen Police Department right on Main Street. Inspection and check-in begins at 11 a.m., followed by the auction beginning at noon. The auction will be held in a standard format with bikes going to the highest bidder. This is as much a community event as it is an opportunity to get a bicycle. Even if you're just passing by, stop by around 11:30. You're going to see all your friends here in the off-season just taking a gander at what's out there. I also wanted to let everybody know that Aspen 360, which used to be called the Aspen Citizen Academy, is back for 2024. Applications open this Saturday, June 1st, and they will stay open for a month until July 1st. You can apply at aspen.gov for the Aspen Citizens Academy, now known as Aspen 360. Aspen 360, just to let you know a little bit more about it, it's designed to provide participants with insight into the roles, responsibilities, limits, and services offered by our local government. The sessions consist of a series of meetings and field trips. I think, Sam, did you participate in the Citizens Academy?
I did.
And you enjoyed it, yes?
Yes, I think it's a good precursor for potential run for any elected office, but also just a wonderful time to learn more about how city government works and the services provided to you especially.
Thank you for that. The classes meet for a total of 7 sessions over a 3-month period from August to October. Class topics include city overview, city services, environment, built environment, infrastructure, tax dollar funds, and special services, parks and open spaces, and community involvement. If you have any more questions, please reach out to our comms team, emily.ford@aspen.gov, and she can answer your questions. It's a great program. And then lastly, I wanted to make a mention about Scott Miller, a valued member of our staff and team here. Scott has been the city's Public Works Director and is retiring this week after 16 years of service with the city of Aspen. He began his career here with the city in 2008 as Capital Asset Director and moved to Director of Public Works in 2014. Under his leadership of Public Works, Aspen became the 3rd municipal electric utility in the nation to achieve a 100% renewable energy electric portfolio. Also, under Scott's leadership, the city built 210 new affordable housing units, along with a new city hall and Aspen Police Building, as well as renovated the interior and exterior of the historic Wheeler Opera House. I want to say, Scott, thank you for all your work for the city of Aspen. You have been a pleasure to work with. I've really enjoyed your insight and your area of expertise in development and taking our projects and our assets to completion in a lot of cases, and maintenance and upkeep for future generations. So to you, I say thank you on behalf of the entire city council and the citizens of Aspen. Of course, you're welcome to make any comments you want, but you don't have to make any if you don't want to.
You just turned it off.
Yep. Agreed.
I should know that. So thank you, Mayor. It's been quite a ride, and I appreciate you bringing it up, and I guess we're celebrating something on Thursday at 3 o'clock here. I think it's 3:30. 3:30. Thank you very much.
We will see you then. Thank you for
Thanks,
everything. Looking for any agenda amendments. I don't see any on tonight's agenda, and that brings us to city manager's comments tonight.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. Just 3 items for you. As you set off on your summer travels and we continue this conversation about the Armory, I have 3 locations I encourage you to stop by on your runs to and fro Denver. Consider stopping in Silverthorne at Bluebird Market. It's an interesting food hall that also has a branch of the public library in it, and a preservation of a historic structure. They essentially built the entire food hall around that structure to preserve it and eventually renovate it into a complementary use to the other activities. What I like about this particular food hall is that it has some of those informal meeting spaces. I've stopped by a few times, and every time, and I go up and talk with folks, they're the local book club. They are, a sports rec league, parents planning events, things of that nature that that space really helps facilitate in that community. That one was fully privately developed, as my recollection, maybe a bit of land donation from the city or contribution for land. There's also 2 in Durango. I think some of you might be headed to Durango in August for CAST at minimum. Jen and I toured 2 places. Well, we toured a few places, but the ones that particularly might be of interest to council is the 11th Street Station. It is an outdoor food hall that is built with a former service station. One of the things that I like about this particular model is it has communal kitchen in back of house, but it'll give you an idea of the scale of back of house operations necessary for these type of operations. Again, this one is also privately managed and owned. The last one is in Durango, a place called the Smiley Building. The Smiley Building is a reuse building. It used to be, and I can't recall if it was the school district administration offices or whether it's a former school itself. But how this particular place works is think a little bit about the red brick nonprofit side, but they've built in as well community spaces, including a locally serving coffee shop that has basic menu. I say, simple prepared counter service. And additionally, it has a space dedicated to the display of artists' work and allowing for some commissioning opportunities for artists, and that space is actually pretty big in it. So just as you're in your travels, those might be 3 places you want to hit up locally. If you want some options in Denver, happy to talk about those too. I would say the thing closest to what you've been talking about here that I've been to is next to Fiddler's Green, and it's changed hands 3 times now, which gives me a little bit of concern, but that is the closest in terms of sort of the feel I've heard you asking for. I've been to Edgewater. I don't know that it's quite what you're looking for when I think about the mix of uses in there, but just some options for you. Secondly, I wanted to just shout out for a fantastic first-year program of our cultural vibrancy grants to artists. This is the first time the city has given grants directly to artists, and they were both adult and youth artists. There's a celebration of their work and a viewing of their work that occurred 2 weeks ago now, maybe, shortly after the last council meeting. And it was just, the buzz and energy in that room was fantastic and really showed how these grants went the distance for these artists and how they are contributing to the vibrancy of Aspen's arts and culture scene. And then the last thing is just a friendly reminder, this coming Monday, Bob Widner will be here for training. If you have not had an opportunity yet to read the book, Bob's Rules of Order, that was shared with you a few months ago, I encourage you to read up because it will make the conversation much easier and help, quite frankly, speed the conversation up if you already have some familiarity with the materials before sitting down for that training on Monday. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Board reports? Any brief board reports?
Yeah, I had a meeting with RWAPA, Rudite Water and Power Authority. It was pretty short, but another presentation from Jeff Deems from Airborne Snow Observatories, which is where they fly over our snowpack and bounce LiDAR off the surface to measure how deep it is with really detailed results. Unfortunately, the meeting took place the day before the second flight, so we don't get that information. But the good news is, about 6 weeks ago, the same outfit predicted that our runoff was going to be super fast because of that heavy dust layer and how warm the snowpack was. But because we got 2 feet of snow, minimum at high elevation, since then, we're looking like we're going to have a really nice slow runoff, or slower than we have had. Another really interesting thing that came out of the talk was we were talking about fire, and the fire out in Snowmass Village that burned that apartment building. It turns out that took 270,000 gallons of water to put it out. And they figure if they had 18 fires of that same size, that would erase all the water in Snowmass Village's whole system. So basically, our current water systems aren't built to handle the size of fires that are predicted to happen. And that's a big concern for all of us. Anyway, that's it for RWAPA.
Thank you. I attended the Aspen Chamber Resort Association board meeting this morning, albeit remotely. But today on our agenda, we had the CTO DEIA audit. That is the Colorado Tourism Office DEIA audit, basically talking to ACRA about, our diversity, equity, inclusion, and our actions around our marketing as well as our kind of community welcoming for others and our visitors as well as our residents. Not a whole bunch to report there. That there was some good news and some areas for improvement as we, all expressed our desire for a diverse visitor base. And so measures towards that end are a few, but will be things that ACRA is looking to include into their outreach as well as information and policies. Second to that, we had a history of ACRA's location. This is all kind of giving the board members the information as we at this table are talking about ACRA offices, visitor center spaces, whether it's the Armory, Powerhouse, and others. Just looking at, it was just to give us an overview of the history of the city and ACRA's location and therefore relationship. Sarah, as a matter of fact, attended the meeting this morning to offer any insight or information and clarifications. So thank you for being there for that, Sarah. And then lastly, we had a conversation around the board retreat, which was last month, end of last month, and just recapping kind of what ACRA had heard from the board members. Everything from areas of success to areas of improvement, and there were items on both of those lists. That is all for my board reports, and that'll move us down to our consent calendar on tonight's agenda. Tonight's agenda's consent calendar is resolution number 64, civil and electrical design, Puppy Smith to red brick circuit replacement. Resolution number 63, this is Castle Creek Bridge assessment and a change order for more information. Board appointment and draft minutes of April 23rd and May 6th. Are there any items here that council members need to pull for more discussion?
63, please.
63. All right, with that, we'll, resolution 63, this is the Castle Creek Bridge assessment and change order.
Could I request that we pull up attachment B on the screen? Most of my comments are related to specific scope items in the change order. Is that doable?
Yes, somebody
Thanks.
leave. Can we bring that up?
It's going to take me a minute because I am not logged into Zoom.
Okay.
I'll start with sort of overall stuff while Sarah's doing that. But firstly, thank you for bringing this back to us. Thank you for bringing it quickly. I'm super supportive of doing that. Several of these requests came from me, so thank you. In attachment B, which is the very clearly defined scope that Jacobs put together as this change order to their contract or additional scope of their contract, I have some concerns and some opinions. The first one is on number 6, which they call alternatives footprint analysis. And my interpretation of this is that almost all of this relates to further studying and engineering both the temporary and permanent solutions through Maroldt from the end of West Main into Maroldt open space. Is that fairly accurate, or am I misunderstanding? Some of this is quite technical, so I want to make sure I'm understanding it.
So the alternatives footprint analysis does attempt to answer the question that I think it was Mayor Tory asked related to the preferred alternative and then also a narrower platform, so a smaller right-of-way. So it's responsive to the questions that were asked in that April 15th work session.
Okay. So respect, obviously, that Tory is interested in that information. I would ask you to consider how big of a piece of scope that is and how expensive that is, and whether it's worth doing. you know, I don't see the value in that, since I'm just not supportive of the preferred alternative in general. But that's, you know, $160,000 of this change order to answer that question. So I guess I'd open it up as, like, do we think that's worthwhile?
If I may,
Please.
it also could provide some clarity related to a temporary bridge if there were a detour that would be using that alignment through Marult. So that's something that was one of the options that was considered about a detour.
Thanks for that clarity. So yeah, I guess I would open it to others to discuss, like, is it worth it to do that piece of this scope in your minds?
John?
I just assumed that it was necessary just because there is going to be a temporary bridge necessary to do that work.
Not in all scenarios, John. There's something called the shifted 3-lane. Is that right? Is that the right term? Which does not require a temporary detour through Marult. So, just for clarity, there is a way to do this without that.
So I still would love this information. You know, I am not completely sold on whether or not we can accomplish our goals through the S-curves. You know, it's no secret, I've been a long-time advocate for a 3-lane bridge there for over 20 years. But I don't know, because I haven't had the other information to see if that's gonna, like, I'm not really interested in taking out the Christian Science Reading Room building. If that curb can be softened without removing the building, then I'm more amenable to it, but I'm not really interested in buying and destroying buildings. So for me, I'm still at a place where I don't know if what's best for our community is a modified preferred alternative. And so for me, I know it's $160,000, but for me, I'm still really thinking about, you know, what are we going to be able to say to our community about what is going to be effective here? And so for me, I would love this information. As I shared in our last meeting around this, you know, I do not support or have not been supportive of what we were shown as the preferred alternative in the iteration last year, which was a lot of lanes and a lot of transit and a lot of shoulder. And so my main question there was, hey, what can we get this down to? That would determine what its impact is on the Marult open space. And like I said, as it works with the S-curves, I'm not sure we can get where we want to be through the S-curves yet. So for me, yes, I would love to keep this in.
Fair enough, thanks.
And I just want to add, yes, I'm aware that a temporary bridge isn't necessary under the 3-lane bridge scenario, but I don't think anything should be left off the table right now. When the preferred alternative first was presented, I thought, well, there are too many lanes going in and out, but I do see limitations with the 3-lane bridge that I'm not completely comfortable with. And I don't think anything should be left off the table. I think we need to do this work to see if a temporary bridge is necessary, how does it work?
Thanks for your thoughts. So,
Yeah, I'll move on.
keep it in?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I'm generally okay with 7, given relatively small costs there, and I know Sam in particular, you were interested in that information. I think I'm fine with that. Number 8, I don't see the value in this information personally. I think that's super difficult to assess. I think point blank, this is going to be highly impactful economically, no matter what we do, both from a cost standpoint and from an impacts standpoint to lifestyle and everything else. So I don't want to spend the $60,000 on that personally. I just don't think it's that. I don't think it should be the primary driver of the decision making. So I don't really want or need that information. I don't remember that being discussed or asked for in our last meeting on this either, but perhaps I'm not remembering correctly.
I think it was something that we wanted to include in this contract as an add alternate because we've heard from community members about concerns over the 3 or 4 year timeline. And, this would give clarity to understanding those impacts to local businesses. So it is provided as an add alternate for that reason.
Good. Thanks for the explanation. I still don't see the value in it, so wanted to check in with others.
Yeah, I can kind of agree with what you're saying. 60,000 is not a big deal in the scope of this, though. So for me, if this is something that is, the one part I like about this is talking to businesses, right? And see what their feelings are. What are they anticipating, as part of public outreach? As far as studying and analyzing the impacts of 3 and 4 year construction project, I agree with what you're saying. I don't see how this is necessary to the decision-making that's gonna happen.
I guess here's what I would counter with, Tori, is there's been so much opportunity for outreach with businesses over the years and even fairly recently. And I think you could sum it up as simply as saying, fix the traffic, which is a gross oversimplification, of course, but I think that's probably the overwhelming sentiment of businesses is improve upon traffic, right? I personally get that. I won't forget it. I don't know that, trying to make up numbers, and that's no insult to Jacobs. I just think it's like a very, very difficult thing to try to assess. I just don't think that changes that very valid point, which I think is probably the overwhelming sentiment of business owners in Aspen.
Yeah, understood. Input from John or Sam?
I'm okay with keeping it in there.
I guess my input is I just keep wondering what the direction is of this council as far as whether come August we will make a decision or whether, like I asked earlier, this will head towards a vote of some kind. And one thing I've been thinking about a lot recently is wondering if we should put out an advisory vote in the November election, which could be any scope that this council wants to maybe get the actual temperature of this community at this point. Since one of my biggest issues with the entrance, other than going through open space, is that the last time that this was voted on was 1998, when I was 5 or maybe even 4 at that point. So it just doesn't sit right with me. And I tend to agree with Bill on what you're saying, but, even looking at all this and understanding that, I am okay with all the information being in there just because of that potential advisory vote we might be going towards, or the hope that we actually make a decision as a council come our August meeting with all the information on the table. So that's my methodology, and that's how I'm thinking about this, and that's why I'm okay with spending this money. And even though this was off of Bill's question, one of the things that I was going to say, this one maybe not so much, but a lot of this information will be valuable regardless, because no matter what happens, this bridge is not going away. This bridge will be there even if it's replaced, and that new information for that new potential bridge, whether it be with another bridge, is important to have. But totally understand, still just feeling like want to get all the information out there so we can make a decision as a council or have an advisory vote and then finally make some concrete decisions on this. Because as we saw with US Route 50 and the bridge there on the way to Gunnison and the stuff that's happening with that, I think time is of the essence, and it is time to make a decision with all the information on the table. So.
Okay.
So keep it in there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks to everyone for considering these things. Again, I think it's important. I'm super supportive of Sam's notion to get a decision advanced. I just want to make sure we're being responsible with our spending on this change order. So thanks for all the information and consideration.
Yep. My only question in here, Jen, was, I was just wondering about that, my suggestion about that, the scope of that. It refers in here about softening corners and possible property purchase and that kind of thing. I just wanted to make sure that that scope is wide enough. It's not just singularly talking about, bless you, you know, I just want to know that like I said, if it's possible to soften the curb without removing a building, I wanted to know if that's in the thinking, that is in the analysis that they would be doing.
Yeah, this goes to 15% design, so, which should provide some additional information about the alignments. They're the two different alignments related to the Eskers, and I don't know if you have anything to add.
I'd agree, or confirm what you're saying, that it's looking at that very conceptual level, but nothing is, it's refining what you all saw on the April 15th council meeting. So looking more closely at impacts, refining what those square footage numbers are with more information to get to 15%.
Okay, all right, thanks. That was my only question. Sam?
As far as I could tell, and this was confirmed or sent to me by someone else as well, but missing from the contract amendment, no work is proposed to answer, which was question number 2 in the April 29th memo, asking reducing the overall width of a 3-lane bridge so that it fits in the existing right-of-way. I'm not sure if that was in this memo or going to be studied or it was just missed, but I think that was asked about whether a 3-lane bridge can fit in the existing right-of-way shifted.
And
So-
not
so
have the pedestrian, it was.
So there is an element of this that addresses the request to study the removal of the pedestrian way, and what are the ADA requirements that we would have to meet in order to have this bridge be rebuilt. So there is a component of the scope that addresses that.
Maybe I can help refine this a little bit more. I think it's important that we get a definitive answer on if some version of a 3-lane bridge can fit within the confines of the current right-of-way. So not necessarily the current dimensions of the bridge, but the current right-of-way, platted right-of-way, is wider than the current dimensions of the bridge, I believe. And is there a version of the 3-lane bridge that can fit within that right-of-way? And I think one of many reasons why it's asked is it could significantly simplify the approval processes I think, but I'm not super educated on this, if we're not amending the size of the right-of-way. So whether that's with or without pedestrian a pathway, we'd like to understand if that's possible.
I can answer that. At the April 15th work session, what Jacobs presented was, thoroughly vetted. They looked at a whole array of different ways to fit a bridge into the existing, right-of-way and alignment in that location. The thing that may change that's part of the scope is potentially looking at pedestrian, removal of the pedestrian access. So that will be part of the scope, looking at that option. As a design team, they do not see or recommend any other ways to be changing what was presented in the April 15th work session.
I'm not sure that answers my question. So I specifically remember in the 3-lane shifted, they talked about potential acquisition of adjacent property, either in order to facilitate construction or to expand the right-of-way. I don't know if that applied to other options presented as well or not. But again, I want to make sure we have explicit confirmation or explicit answer from Jacobs on whether, and sorry to take this over from you, I meant to mention it. Explicit confirmation from them whether it's possible to fit a 3-lane bridge totally within the confines of the existing right-of-way, and if there are benefits in doing so. So I don't know if that needs to be added to their scope or if it's already in their scope, but I do want to make sure that while we have them going on this round of work, that that's part of it.
So we can look at whether it physically fits, but you may have legal barriers as well, is what the team's trying to tell you, because of requirements to meet accessibility for multiple modes of transportation. But we can refine that with Jacobson's if a majority of the council wishes us to do so.
I do think answering that question is important, because if the answer is somehow a blessed yes, you can do that, it might be a great option. It might be. So I think it's worthwhile. I would hope it doesn't cost a ton of money to answer that question. I feel like it's conceptual versus.
Yeah, we'll just have to see if that can be done at 15% design for that location. I don't know if we can get that level without survey work of detail sorted out, and so we may need to come back to you. So my recommendation may be that if you choose to approve this tonight, a majority of you, is that you, in your motion to approval, or if we need to amend the resolution, as I look at the city attorney for help on that, you can amend it to give me some flexibility to finalize that scope, knowing that it may be some additional dollars beyond the existing presented to you tonight.
Yeah, and again, I'd love to understand whether or not there are benefits to maintaining the right-of-way. Does it streamline the process? Does it negate the need for certain studies or approvals, or not? I don't know. But there are some who have suggested it would be a much more streamlined process if we did not need to acquire additional adjacent right-of-way, particularly as it relates to federal environmental studies and things like that. So.
That's what I was going to say, is that open question about whether or not this would be self-funded and whether there would be a NEPA process, which is, again, part of this analysis, would also inform some of that as well.
Perfect.
So.
Thanks.
And then, thank you for that.
Thank you.
I would. The last thing, I already stated it, but I did want to turn to Sarah and ask. The bridge does need to be rebuilt at some point. A lot of the scope of this work does help with that eventually. Like, even if a preferred alternative or a straight shot is approved, this information can be useful for rebuilding this bridge.
I would say probably. The difference here is that the city is paying for it, whereas under the preferred alternative, this cost would have been the responsibility of the Colorado Department of Transportation.
Okay, but still can be made useful. Anyway, I'm ready to make a motion if people are ready for that.
Any other questions? Okay. Yep.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar with the caveat that Resolution 63 is given flexibility to the city manager to finalize that scope to answer the questions that we just talked about.
I'll second that.
For clarity, can I ask for some clarity here?
Yeah, you can.
That may come with some additional costs, is my understanding. Do you want to authorize the city manager to amend the scope up to an additional amount? Or are you giving her unfettered authority to amend the scope to evaluate the three-lane option further? Microphone? Sorry.
Wow.
25.
Is there an estimate that anyone can give me about how much that might cost, so I can give a reasonable number?
Why don't you start at 25? Let's start at 25,000, and I'll let you know if it doesn't work.
Okay, 25,000, I accept that.
I'll accept that modification to the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Could we have a roll call vote for the consent calendar, please?
Counselor Doyle,
Yes.
Counselor Guth,
Yes.
Counselor Rose,
Yes.
Mayor Tory.
Yes. Thank you to all staff members that were here for our consent calendar items. We appreciate you. That'll bring us down to public hearings. Our first one is ordinance number 5845 Meadows Road, minor amendment to plan development, project review, commercial design review, growth management review.
Me again.
While she's getting set up, I should probably note, I do have a property that we've talked about at this table a bunch at Fourth and Gillespie. I had Jim and Ben confirm that I'm not conflicted on this topic.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm Sammy Montalto, again, hello. We are back here for second reading of Ordinance number 5, series of 2024, which is a minor PD amendment to allow for temporary structures at Aspen Institute. So just to briefly reiterate from first reading, Aspen Institute has been hosting events for years, but they have not yet received any temporary use approvals from council for the temporary structures associated with these events. We are bringing this request to you as a minor PD amendment, and the motivation behind taking this path was to memorialize the approval and to streamline the process for both staff and the Institute. The main event that has mandated council approval is the Ideas Festival. This is the largest event the Institute hosts, and it requires the most tents. And here you can see a list of the proposed tents and their locations on the property that you saw last time. Now that we're at second reading, I wanted to briefly touch on the mitigation methodology. So part of this approval will require the Institute to pay annual affordable housing mitigation fees for any days of tent use beyond the 14 days that are allowed per our land use code. In the table here, you can see the square footages for each tent, the total number of days that the tent will be up for, and the mitigation days, which is the number of days I used in the mitigation formula. The rightmost column there shows the mitigation fee calculated for each tent, and the grand total for 2024 is $9,875.76. At first reading, you all had requested that we include approved tent locations to prevent tents from being placed in sensitive areas. So with that in mind, I created this map here on the right, which is aligned with the campus map for the Ideas Fest that you saw on the previous slide. So the areas in blue are indicated as areas appropriate for temporary structures, and this map is included as an exhibit with the ordinance.
Can I ask a quick one on here, Sammy?
Sure.
Each tent gets 14 days of exemption from mitigation.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any limit to that? So could 100 tents each get 14 days of exemption?
That was how we
Or is there
applied
a
it.
size, is there a square footage limit, or is there
The
anything
code
in the
does not
current code?
list a square footage limit. So we applied the same methodology that you had applied to St. Regis. So we did take 14 days off of each tent here. So you can see some of these are only up for 14 days, so they're not even being mitigated for because that's under the 14-day
Right.
limit. It's been treated differently in the past with past, annual subscribers, if you will. But we thought this was fitting for the Institute, unless you disagree.
No, I certainly don't want to pull the rug out from anyone in the middle of this, but that might be something for sort of future contemplation is there's a big difference between one tent on one property and how many are on this?
Several.
Right. So maybe something to think about sort of longer term is there a total square footage limit of tents for the 14-day exemption? Is there a total number of tents for the 14-day exemption? Something like that. Or temporary structures is probably the right term, right?
I will say before you continue, just in response to that, I think based on recent conversations with council, I think the whole conversation around tents and kind of community expectations around these types of structures, I think is a topic that is worthy of further discussion on a lot of fronts.
Thanks.
Indeed. Well, to wrap up quickly so we can continue talking about it, in summary, we believe that the events hosted by Aspen Institute are beneficial to the community without being overly disruptive to their neighbors, and due to the number of temporary use days that these events require, the Institute needs approval from you, Council, and they also need to pay annual affordable housing mitigation fees. So with enthusiasm and gusto, we recommend approval of ordinance number 5, series of 2024.
With gusto?
Gusto. And also one modified change that's pretty technical in nature that I think we need to bring to your attention before you deliberate. It's about the exhibit related that's in the ordinance, not necessarily the exhibits that are associated with the memo. We included that map, kind of identifying the locations as an exhibit. And on further discussion, we removed what had been previously like a proposed calculation for the mitigation, which is in the land use code. We didn't think that was necessary as an exhibit. So in section number 2, oh, you have that pulled up?
I did. Yeah.
Great. There's a line that says set forth in Exhibit A. That is no longer accurate. With the addition of the map and getting rid of that sort of calculation, it needs to read as set forth in 2647090.h, which is simply the section of the land use code where the methodology is identified. So just a technical change to the ordinance related to the exhibits.
But the changes are in the ordinance that we have in our packet?
With this right here, there's a modified change to the ordinance that needs just to change.
We'll need a motion to amend the ordinance for this adjustment.
I think it's just as simple as a motion to amend as proposed by staff.
Thank you.
Because I don't know that you can remember that code section. I know I can't.
Are there any other questions of staff at this time? This is a public hearing, so if there's any members of the public that wish to comment this evening on ordinance number 5, now is the time. Call for public comment on a public hearing. Seeing none in the room, seeing none online, I'll bring it back to council table. Council, any other questions or comments?
Ready for a motion?
Yes?
I'll make a motion to pass ordinance number 5, series of 2024.
As amended.
As amended, sorry.
Second.
That's fine.
Okay.
Sorry.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Could we have a roll call vote for ordinance number 5, please?
Counselor Doyle,
Yes.
Counselor Guth,
Yes.
Counselor Rose.
Yes.
Mayor Tory.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was your gusto that got it over the edge.
Yeah.
I knew that would work.
Yeah, you did it.
You did.
Provide an amended ordinance to, thanks. Thank you.
All right, our next item up is ordinance number 6. This is the Burlingame Early Childhood Education Center.
Sammy, can you please quit sharing screen? Yeah. Oh, sorry. You don't want to just keep staring at that?
Yeah, as amended.
Oh,
You're gone.
it was taken care of for you.
Share your screen, or do we need me to do it on here? I'm gonna need to share.
Thanks, Sammy.
Thanks.
Good evening, City Council, Mayor Tory, Jeffrey Barnhill, City Planner, City of Aspen. Today, we are going to be talking about Burlingame Early Childhood Education Center. We're going to have Glenn do the applicant presentation first, and then followed by staff presentation.
And we happen to have someone who was just promoted last week at the table. So maybe, Ben, why don't you do the honors of announcing it?
Yeah, we will be doing an announcement of several personnel moves within community development, but of note, because he's sitting here next to me, Mr. Barnhill was just promoted to senior planner within our department.
Congrats, Jeff.
Well done.
He also just passed his AICP test.
Oh, wow.
All right, so, are you like signed into the meeting? Okay. Javier, can you make Glenn a presenter? What's his name? Glenn Horn? Did you sign into the?
Yeah.
Here, we'll just do it on mine. Since I'm a presenter. Where's up?
AI ain't all it's cracked up to be always.
Just a few moments here.
Do you ever use it?
All right.
Like the tiniest bit of.
Checked it out kind of thing?
I did a press release with it recently, which was quite helpful. Saved a bunch of time, and I edited it from there, but it was like, cut an hour
Yep, I
out.
got
They
yours
gave
here
you the
now.
bones, and then you were like, oh,
And then I'll
okay.
start from beginning.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Haven't done a ton though.
But that's similar to like how I think it's best used,
you.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
It can't give you the final product, but it can give you a good start on what you're up to.
Yeah, and like a nice format, like saves a lot of brain damage for sure.
Okay, thank you. I want to enter this affidavit of public notice into the record. My name is Glenn Horn, and I, along with Andy Korber, the project architect, represent the city of Aspen in this land use application. Okay. For the Burlingame Early Childhood Education Center. Jen Phelan's the project manager. Andy Korber's the architect. And Greg McDowell's joining the meeting remotely. He's the transportation, it's Greg Schrader with McDowell Engineering. He's the transportation engineer. So, we're seeking land use approvals for the Early Childhood Education Center. The idea is to build this facility at some point in the future when it's funded. There's no funding available now, but we are seeking a long-term vested property right for 10 years so that we have a project that's designed, approved, and vested should a opportunity come along for funding or a grant. This was something that was addressed at the first reading. In 2011, the City Council approved Phase 2 of the Burlingame Ranch Affordable Housing Subdivision and PUD. As part of that process, the City Council granted conditional approval of a child care facility, but it was understood there'd have to be a substantial plan amendment to the Burlingame project prior to the development of the Early Childhood Education Center. So that's the process we're going through now. The planning process has included an extensive neighborhood outreach program. There was a survey of residents in Burlingame as well as in the community regarding child care facilities. There were advisory group meetings. We looked at Colorado and local child care facilities to study them to see what should be included in this proposal. We held open houses at Burlingame and also at City Hall. Information was disseminated door to door and via a website that was developed for the project. A question came up about the demand for childcare in the valley at the last meeting, and this slide shows the results of the analysis of what the waiting lists are for childcare in the valley. Rocky Mountain Early Childhood Council estimated in April of 2022 that there were 314 children on waiting lists for childcare facilities. The Confluence Early Childhood Coalition looked at the waiting list in October of 2023 and estimated that there were 266 children on waiting lists for childcare facilities. Kids First looked at it this year, and in April of 2024, the wait list for childcare in Pickens County was 306 children.
Can I jump in there, Glenn?
Sure.
Please. Thank you. Yeah, I want to preface this by saying I have 3 young kids. I'm in it. I totally get how difficult childcare can be. But I want to make sure that we're getting this right and we're putting our resources in the right place. And what I'm struggling with, really, the only thing on this proposal I'm struggling with at all is is the demand there? And, I don't know if you're the one to answer this or not, Glenn, but I see this wait list of 306 children at Kids First, and then I drop off my youngest daughter there in the morning, and there's flyers saying, we've got all these openings. why are we advertising? It's in the newspaper, we're advertising openings. So how can we be advertising openings and recruiting children, yet we have a 306 person wait list? There's a mismatch there, which I don't understand.
So a couple of things. One, this is a common time because of kids moving up to start having changes in enrollment this time of year. Secondly, we have seen a slowdown in the demand in Aspen. There's been additional facilities built mid and lower valley that has taken some of the pressure off. However, this 306 children from April 2024 is what was reported by Picken County child care providers, because there may be a mismatch between the age of the child and the openings that exist as a common occurrence. So I would say that the matchmaking requires some fluidity for what families' needs are. So having 306 children on the wait list, it could be some of those children only needed 3 days a week to meet those families' needs. So there's lots of different ways. Tonight, we're asking for entitlement approval. We're not asking for construction approval. And so I just want to differentiate the two of those. We would be unable to respond when demand increases with construction if we don't get this piece in place first that would allow for fundraising.
Thanks. I totally appreciate that. I just know that I think it's realistic that once we approve these entitlements, then a funding plan is going to start to be created. That's what follows next. And you know, whatever funds we allocate towards this project are not going to be used for some other project. So for me, it's just making sure that we've got our priorities right and we're putting our financial resources where they best serve this community. So thanks for answering that. I don't know that I'm going to get an answer that like totally resolves this conflict for me, but I wanted to get it out there. Thanks.
Okay. Moving on, there were questions about demographics and how many kids are we talking about at the first reading. And this is some demographic information that we have about Burlingame. 141 households in Burlingame in the 3 phases. There are 245 kids living in Burlingame, but we don't have data on the age distribution of those kids. So I think this gets to what you're talking about, Bill, and that, you know, we don't really have a handle on how many of these kids are going to come out of Burlingame, but that might be something that can be investigated in the future. So the project, let's see if you can, okay, here we go. This is Harmony Road as you come down into Burlingame over the little hill. You get to this intersection here, and you've got Pepke Drive going to the left, Forge Road going to the right. The project site is outlined in red. It's Lot Park C is where the Early Childhood Education Center will be located. Lots 3 and 4 are affordable housing future sites, and they're included in the application because they're going to be boundary line adjustments between Lot Park C and lots 3 and 4. This is the site in plan as opposed to the aerial. Here's the hill to the left here. That's Harmony Road. So on this slide, you're coming down this way, and here, you would be coming down the hill, and to the left is the site on the top of the screen. And you've got Pepke Drive going to the left towards the top of the screen. Harmony Road is to the left, back up the hill towards Highway 82. This is a photo of the site at the intersection of Harmony Road and Pepke Drive. You can see Burlingame Phase 3 in the background, the tail of Deer Hill in the background on the left side of that photo. This is a view across from Harmony Road towards Pepke Drive. You can see Deer Hill in the background, Phase 3 to the left. And here is an illustrative site plan of the project. You can see the gray structure in the middle is the Early Childhood Education Center. You can see the city trail heading towards Deer Hill to the left above the structure. The parking area, we're proposing phased parking. First phase would be 31 cars, 10 in a second phase for 41 cars, and 5 on-street parking spaces. This was an issue of concern at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, but this is the proposal here before you for 41 parking spaces to be done in a phased manner. With respect to the facility itself, based upon state standards, there could be 94 children here, 16 infants, 20 toddlers, 58 preschoolers. The key consideration is that there's a lower child-to-teacher ratio than the industry standard, and there could be less kids than 94. There could be 84 kids, probably something in that range. The building itself is going to be about 15,000 square feet in size. It'll be 2 stories above grade. There'll be mechanical space below. It's about 39 feet tall. As I mentioned before, 41 off-street parking spaces, and there's a higher area to child ratio than the standard in the field. These are the cost projections that we have in 2022 dollars. The low end would be 17.5 million to a high end of 19.7. The building itself would range between 13.2 million and 14.9 million. The site work is expensive. It's 3.4 million to 3.8 million, and there's an inflation escalation factor in here of 0.9 million to 1 million. Once again, this is in 2022 numbers.
Glenn, does the top line include soft costs, especially mitigation costs?
It does not include mitigation costs.
Other soft costs?
Do we have other soft costs?
Just construction costs? Hard only, thank you.
So the next slide, you get an image of what the building would look like. This is from Harmony Road, Pepke Drive intersection. This slide shows the various playgrounds around the building. Once again, in the upper left-hand corner, that's a shot across the parking lot from the intersection of Harmony Road and Pepke Drive. You can see, if you look at this slide, the playgrounds in front of the building. They're shown here on these other 3 slides that appear on this slide. Here's a shot that shows the context of the building within the neighborhood. The early childhood education centers on the left, with Burlingame Phase 3 to the right. You can see in the front are the 2 vacant lots where there would be affordable housing built on lots 3 and 4. Here's a shot from Harmony Road across towards Pepke Drive with the Burlingame Phase 3 in the background and Deer Hill beyond that. This is an image from Pepke Drive looking across at the Early Childhood Education Center, Phase 3 to the right. This came up at the first reading in terms of how are we going to accommodate the FTEs generated by this project. If you look at this slide, the column on the left shows the FTEs that are housed in City of Aspen projects. There are 17 projects, and there are credits for 153 FTEs. And there are presently 96.15 FTEs housed in those city projects. So there is additional, there are additional credits available, the difference between 96.15 and 153 in City of Aspen projects. It's anticipated using the employee generation rate of 0.65 for commercial and lodge development. We applied that to the employees that would be generated in this project. Approximately 24 employees would be generated. So if you apply that 0.65 percentage to the FTEs that are generated, there would be a requirement to house 15.6 employees to mitigate for this project. So if that was deducted from what's available, the 96.15 that are available, there would still be a remaining FTE balance in City of Aspen projects of 41.25.
Glenn, could you explain, please, where the 153 comes from?
Yeah, that's the next slide,
Okay,
a detail of it. There are 17 projects, and on the left column here, it names those projects, and it identifies the number of FTEs housed that the credits associated with each one of those projects. So you see there are 153 credits, and right now only 96.15 of them have been used for mitigation. And if you use another 15.6 FTEs for this project, there would still be a balance of 41.25 FTEs associated with those City of Aspen projects, the 17 projects listed on the left-hand side of the slide.
Okay, so two questions. These are sort of theoretical credits because our land use code does not currently allow the City of Aspen to generate credits or certificates. Is that right? Or am I thinking about this the right way or not?
It's a different concept. Ben Anderson, Community Development Director. It's a different concept. I think when we hear the word credits associated with mitigation, I think often, most commonly, we're thinking about the Affordable Housing Certificates Program. This is a different concept. It's trying to give a measure to the housing that City of Aspen has committed to building units for our own employees, and some evaluation of the number of FTEs based on how we calculate those things in the land use code that are sort of housed by the housing that we created within the 505 fund, and then where we have landed mitigation for different projects. So it's a different concept. Similar, oftentimes that word credit is used in this concept, but it's a distinct concept.
And in clarity, you do not need to use these, council. This was a concept born out of the entitlements for this building. It really is, in my opinion, not a very useful tool. When the reason you have the 505 fund is to provide essential services. And so I am not opposed to this project needing to pay its mitigation fees for the childcare created in it. Certainly it increased the costs, but I just want you to know this really is not a codified process. The zoning classification on the project does not necessitate this step.
Got it. So to dumb this down, what you're showing is that of the 505 fund, we have bedrooms equivalent to 153. Is that right? 153 credits. And we're only using 96.15 of those credits.
For mitigation.
For mitigation where?
For various projects, like there was, for the ARC, 19.3 were used. For the park maintenance facility, 1.85 were used. And I think it's a very theoretical discussion.
Okay.
As Sarah is saying, in that these households were created through City of Aspen projects. And the right column shows how many of them have been utilized to mitigate for other City of Aspen projects.
Okay, I think I get it. Thanks.
So the next slide just lists the land use approvals. It's pretty rote stuff. Plan development, we need a growth management quota system allotment for an essential community facility. There's commercial design review, public projects review, transportation and parking management. There's a subdivision and boundary adjustment because we are taking some land off of lots 3 and 4, but we have tested the sizes, the resulting sizes of lots 3 and 4, and we know that those lots can accommodate affordable housing to be developed in the future, including off-street parking. There's rezoning, and there's really a cleanup rezoning for the little slivers of land that are being adjusted between lots 3 and 4 and lot Park C. And then we're asking for the extended vested property rights term. And the reason is so that we have a project that's vested for 10 years so that if a funding source such as a grant opportunity comes along, we have a project that's ready to go. So with that, I can turn this over to Jeff or take questions, however you want to handle it.
Any questions at this time for Glenn?
Seems pretty clear.
Yeah.
All right, again, Jeffrey Barnhill, City Planner. This is for Burlingame Early Childhood Education Center. And it is May 28th, 2024. Oh, I'm not sharing. Whoops. There we go. All right, a little bit about the site. It is part of the Burlingame Ranch Affordable Housing Development, consisting of 249 affordable housing units, which are owned by the City of Aspen. Burlingame Phase 3 was recently completed and housing received CO in 2024. The project consists of 3 parcels, all of which are owned by the City of Aspen. The site is a little more than an acre of land and is currently vacant. It is located within the Public Zone District with a PD overlay. And lots Park C, lots 3 and lot 4 are vacant lots currently, although Park C does have an existing trail running through the lot that links up to the shared use trail. And again, as Glenn pointed out, here's what you would look at if you were coming down the road, but I went ahead and turned this 90 degrees. So this is the plan view we'll be seeing most of here. The applicant proposes an infant to preschool early childhood education center with a gross floor area of 15,263 square feet and a maximum height of 39.5 feet. The development will accommodate roughly 94 children and have a projected staff of 24 employees. The development includes playgrounds for each age group of children. The applicant proposes 41 total on-site parking spaces to be developed in 2 phases. The first phase would consist of 31 spaces, that's that area in the yellow. The second phase would consist of 10 parking spaces, which is that area in the red adjacent to the yellow. The applicant additionally proposes 5 on-street parking spaces for the Burlingame development at large. The development will require the Crusher Fines Trail to be aligned. It currently runs through Park C parcel. This will require some retaining walls and some grading. The proposed dimensional standards are listed here. These are the proposed elevations. This photo compares the size of the Burlingame ECE to the existing Burlingame Affordable Housing building located adjacent. And lastly, here's a model of the entrance to the Burlingame Early Childhood Education Center. And this project is an essential public facility, and I've just included that definition here. A facility which serves an essential public purpose, is available for use by or benefit of the general public, and serves the needs of the community. So this project is going through a streamlined review process known as major public review. A typical application of this scope would generally go to P&Z for recommendation and later to City Council for conceptual review. Following that initial review, the applicant would be required to submit a second application within 1 year from the conceptual approval for final review, which would have gone to P&Z for final approval. For this project, conceptual and detailed review are packaged into a single application that went before P&Z for a recommendation and now to City Council for final approval. By structuring the review this way, P&Z and Council and the public gain better clarity and continuity as the entire application is discussed at once. In order to be considered a major public project, the project must align with City of Aspen values and goals and provide a public benefit. This project is in a location identified in the Aspen Area Community Plan as the west of Castle Creek corridor. That area should feature separate and recognizable nodes of unique uses and functions. And it recognized the need for important institutional and commercial uses, including childcare. The plan development reviews details up front and provides a more flexible site plan than what underlying zoning allows. PDs are reviewed in 2 phases, project review and detailed review. These are generally reviewed as separate applications. Project review looks at allowed dimensions and site planning, whereas detailed review focuses on the more detailed aspects like materials and landscaping. Again, project review focuses on the general concept for the development and outlines any dimensional requirements. There exists a significant community goal to be achieved through the development of the child care center and variations from the dimensional standards. Staff find the proposed development dimensions represent a character suitable for and indicative of the primary uses of the project. This project has been contemplated in this location since at least 2011. For detailed review, the design of the proposed development is compatible with the context and visual character of the area. The applicant proposes materials that are compatible with the surrounding development and that are seen in the immediate vicinity of the proposed development. Staff finds these criteria met. And then here's another model showing the comparison between the Early Childhood Education Center and the existing Phase 3 affordable housing. As an essential public facility, the amount of mitigation required is discretionary. The Planning and Zoning Commission determined the number of employees generated by the essential public facility pursuant to section 26-470-050C, Employee Generation Review. Council now has the task of assessing the mitigation measures for the proposed project. And there is a section of the code that mentions City Council may assess, waive, or partially waive affordable housing requirements as is deemed appropriate and warranted for the purpose of promoting civic uses and in consideration of broader community goals. The applicant has provided several models depicting how the Burlingame Early Childhood Education Center building fits within the context of Burlingame. The site is unique as the rest of the buildings at Burlingame are residential. The building has been designed to match the styles and aesthetics of the surrounding buildings. The ECE building matches the size, scaling, massing, and architectural materials of the surrounding structures. Pedestrian amenity space is creative, well-designed public places and settings contributing to an attractive, vital, human-scale downtown commercial district and a pleasant pedestrian shopping and entertainment atmosphere. Pedestrian amenity space can take the form of physical or operational improvements to public rights-of-way or private property within commercial areas. I apologize, that is very tiny, but I just read what the definition was there. This project is meeting their pedestrian amenity space. You need to have a total on-site percentage of 25%. And with the improvements proposed, they would be at 28%. So they would be greater than 25%. The transportation impact analysis guidelines inform applicants on the best strategies to mitigate their peak hour new trips. The TIA guidelines describe this type of project as a major development outside of roundabout with significant development. A major development typically would require the development mitigate trips using a minimum of 5 TDM measures. The applicant shall work with the engineering and transportation departments prior to building permit. Currently, the applicant is mitigating for 20 of the 73 vehicle trips. The rest of the 53 vehicle trips will need to be coordinated with engineering and transportation departments prior to building permit. And these are some definitions, just to familiarize yourselves a little bit with some of the terms. MMLOS, multimodal level of service, evaluates the safety and quality of access and flow for transit, pedestrian, and bicycles. And TDM, transportation demand management, is the application of strategies and policies to reduce travel demand.
Jeff, what does it mean that they have to coordinate the rest of their vehicle trips with engineering and building permit?
So before they proceed to building permit, They will need to work with the engineering and transportation departments to figure out what strategies they're going to implement, either multimodal level of service or transportation demand management. So they will need to coordinate with them on what strategies they're going to use, and they'll have to mitigate for the 73 trips prior to building permit.
Okay, thanks.
And the TIA was prepared by McDowell Engineering, and they came up with these 73 trips that were modeled to be generated during peak hours. And here are some of the improvements that they are currently doing. So sidewalk improvements, pedestrian route improvements, driveways, parking and access considerations, and bicycle parking. So again, these are some of the things that they'll need to work with engineering and transportation on. What sort of measures like these are they going to implement to reduce their trips generated? All right, so here's another look at the parking. A typical commercial facility of this size would be required to provide 3 units of parking per 1,000 square feet of net leasable area. That would come out to about 42.75 parking units for a similar development. However, as an essential public facility, parking requirements are reviewed on a case-by-case basis. The 41 parking spaces proposed meet the modeled needs for this development as measured by the transportation consultant firm. And again, they are proposing 46 total spaces, with 36 initial spaces in the first phase and an additional 10 spaces to be added at a later date if deemed necessary by the facility operator. Staff does not support the phased parking plan, and staff does not support the on-street parking spaces off of Harmony Road adjacent to the shared use trail due to some of the impacts that may be caused by having parking directly adjacent to the trail. There's the 5 parking spaces on Harmony Road. So some recommendations from staff are build all the parking in one phase, eliminate the 5 on-street parking spaces, build less parking and incorporate more mobility measures on site, or establish shared parking agreement for some of the parking spots. And then lastly, this is a diagram showing the parking requirements by zone district. As I mentioned earlier, these parking requirements are decided by special review. So these do meet the modeled demands of this development. The proposed boundary adjustment results in the same number of parcels. Following the lot line adjustments, the lots will be proposed gross lot area, lot 3 of 3,920 square feet, lot 4, 3,485 square feet, and lot park C, 39,122 square feet. And this diagram shows the boundary adjustment. That green line is essentially where the boundary created by this plat will be. The rezoning of the lots results in a negligible impact to the existing land use and neighborhood characteristics. So this is showing the areas of the parcels that will need to be rezoned to public and the areas of the parcels that will need to be rezoned to affordable housing. This is simply due to the boundary adjustment. P&Z Resolution 1, Series of 2024, recommended a 5-year vested rights term as timely completion of the project will support a current community goal. Staff recommends approval of the project with the conditions outlined in the resolution. Additionally, staff recommends that the on-street parking and phased parking be removed from the proposal, and a shared parking agreement is contemplated for some of the spaces outside of operating hours. Proposed motion is here. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Bless you. I got a few questions.
Okay, go right ahead.
Jeff, could you talk about, thanks for a great presentation, and it's a beautiful building, and Glenn, you did a great job explaining from the applicant perspective, appreciate it. Jeff, you talked about negative impacts from the trail related to the on-street parking. Could you explain that a little further, please?
Yeah, so engineering and parks were both concerned with adding parking on the shared use trail with users on bicycles or walking, and how that would interact with people driving, parking, opening doors, Yeah, there was just general concern from them on how these spaces would be used and the impacts on the trail.
Okay. And where did the idea to phase the on-site parking come from? Is that to reduce cost or because they weren't sure that they would need the incremental 10 spaces? What is it? What was the genesis of that idea?
Well, the parking is not really a major issue for the applicant. If we need to go with the 41 spaces at one time and eliminating the on-street parking, that's fine. The idea was that maybe you do 31 spaces on-site, and have the 5 parking spaces along Harmony Road, and there would be less need to have an additional 10 spaces built on the site, and there'd be more green area. So the thought was just see how it goes, and if necessary, you build the additional 10 spaces. But I think the concerns that have been raised by Parks and Engineering about people getting out of their car, maybe carrying a baby with a bike coming by and car doors and things, those are valid issues. And like I said, I don't think it's a major issue if all this parking is done on site up front with 41 spaces and you eliminate the 5 spaces on the road.
Thanks. I think that's it for questions. I definitely have a few things I want
Yeah.
to discuss.
We'll get back to it. It's a public hearing as well. Do you have any clarifying questions at this time? No. This is a public hearing. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak this evening on ordinance number 6? Burlingame ECE. Come on up.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Maddie Jimerson, and I live in town. Actually, I live in Burlingame Phase 3. I just moved in, and I work locally in town. And my concern is that OPSHA did not give us any warning of this project proposal, and so, or anyone in the recently purchased units. So my concern is the property value going down with the building being placed right next to the units, and not having been given any sort of warning for this project proposal before purchasing units.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I guess a clarifying question from that. I'm confused. Living in an APSHA unit, I'm sorry, you got up already, but your property value going down even though it goes up on a
Mr.
annual?
If I may interrupt, Mr. Mayor, after you close the public hearing, I'd be happy to provide clarifications.
Okay, well, I'll leave it for that. Thank you, and thanks for your comment.
Good evening, Stefan Reveal, co-chair of Kids First. Just coming, and I was so happy to see the presentation. It was really well done, and mainly I feel like the entire board is very supportive of this program and would love to talk to members about demand, but I feel like there's been years of work put together to get us to this point. I was thinking about this today is that Mary Ryerson, who I work with currently, she's been trying to get more childcare spaces in Aspen for the past 40 years. And so I think this is so great that we're finally here, that we're actually pushing forward, and that we're all thinking about what we want this town to turn into, and also, you know, the demand today and in the future. So thank you so much.
Well, I got you. Can you stay with us for a second? Because I was actually going to ask you to come up as well. So my question to you, the Kids First Board, you guys have had extensive conversations regarding this project. And really just your comments on the concerns for some of us and the concerns of some members of the community. One, demand on the child side, but providers as well. A concern about getting people to be staffing a facility like this. So did you guys at the board, did you talk about those kind of topics? And what could you share us if there was any discussion?
So I think this is a very complicated subject matter. And I think it's something that I dabble in. Nancy and Megan are co-executive directors, would be a much better source for some of that information. But my view has been and continues to be based on the fact that I feel like in the city of Aspen, we continue to struggle to provide families an ability to find a place for their child, and especially, you know, when they have their first child, and then obviously when if they decide to have a second or a third. It is a decision that is made based on many, many factors. And what I want to see is, I would like to see that, you know, just like, you know, my conversation with you, Tori, 2 years ago was, you know, how do we make this town world-class all the way around? You know, we have world-class skiing, yes. We have world-class outdoors. We have a lot of things that are world-class. In this area, I would say that we are failing. A perfect example of this, and just, you know, my basic understanding of this is that you have roughly about 120 kids that are born that come into the city of Aspen looking that are born. So you've got 120, 80 of those are looking for childcare. At the infant level, we have 32 spaces. So right there, we're failing 50, roughly, plus or minus. Well, the additional problem is that infant is 0 through 18 months. So actually, you can do 50% more of that number, right? So the basic idea is that I would like to see people able to have a choice. I would love to see that they have an ability to have fully licensed care, or a nanny share, or, you know, just a few hours here and there. I think we are struggling just to meet the basic level of supply for the demand that's out there. And I think there's a lot of reasons for supporting that, but also I think there's a desire to have people's ability to choose, right? And especially if that person in that family wants to have a career, and both parties in that family want to have a career, it's very hard to do that if you can't have childcare.
Thank you. Any other questions for Steph? Okay. Thank you so much. And thanks for coming tonight. Really appreciate that.
No, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Other public comment this evening on ordinance number 6? All right. I see a hand up. Is that Jessica? Jessica?
Hi.
Hi there.
Thank you so much. Jessica Garrow. I'm a member of the Kids First Board, a former Burlingame resident, and just wanted to share my really strong support for the project. I think that Stefan talked a little bit there about the importance of having some choice in childcare options and opportunities, and this location in Burlingame is one that I know when I lived there would have really appreciated. It's near transit. It has great access to parks and trails. It's a really wonderful space. And so I think that it is very important that we be thinking about the future and where our kiddos are going to get the great care that they need as little ones. So just wanted to express my strong support and encourage council to consider the longest vesting period of 10 years in order to ensure that the project moves forward when there's very clear need and when maybe additional funding opportunities are available, and to just give that flexibility in terms of use of tax dollars. So again, thank you, and just really strongly support the application.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thanks.
Other public comment this evening on ordinance number 6? I'll bring it back to council table. John?
Yeah, I just want to say I fully support this. This has been on our radar since I've been on council, improving childcare in the valley. And I was just out at Burlingame last week for the, I don't know, celebration of all the new units being opened and being lived in now. And it seemed like there were more kids than there were adults out there. So there is a need. And again, I fully support this. Thanks for the presentation.
Thanks. Any other questions at this time, Sam?
I was just wondering if Sarah could address what she had said about lower property values.
The deed restrictions for Burlingame 3 were sold at maximum resale value because they were new units.
Yep.
They will continue to appreciate as the deed restriction reads. That valuation is not affected by surrounding land use. That valuation is based on a CPI index usually, and I believe that's the case in the BG3 deed restriction as well. The second question was about notice. There was extensive outreach. The timing of that versus possibly when people entered the lottery or won units in BG3, you know, I can't answer about how well informed they were in making some of their choices for moving in, knowing or not knowing the potential for this construction activity. What I will say is though, my understanding, and please, anyone at the table, verify that proper notice was made on the site for this land use application, so there was a physical sign placed at the location.
We received noticing which required mailing and mailing within 300 feet of the property. So mail notices were sent to all addresses on file with the assessor's office that were in 300 feet of the property. A notice was posted for both first, second reading. It was also posted for the Planning and Zoning Commission hearings on this case. So there was, I just want to be clear that notices were met at each one of those public hearings, and our land use code requires extensive noticing in those situations.
Yeah, and even though this was more formal, this project's been going on for, in a potential sense, for years.
It was the first project I was given back in May of 2017 when I started here.
Yeah. I mean, I respect what you said. I just was confused by it, so thank you for that clarification. And with that, while I'm talking, I guess I'll say, yeah, I'm fully supportive of this project, especially as proposed right now. I mean, we'll get into the nitty-gritty details later on, but to John's point, I was also at that event last week, and it did feel like there were more kids than adults out there, which is beautiful for that neighborhood, but I know that there are plenty of other spaces in Aspen with a lot of kids and a lot of people that want to have 2 careers and have someone to be able to take care of their children and live a very vibrant and happy life here. And I think this takes a very nice step in that direction and shows good values for this community.
Thanks, Sam. Bill, comments, questions?
Again, really nice project. I'm certainly supportive of it in the long term. I want to make sure that our resources are appropriately allocated, so I do want to be mindful of that as we move forward. And, you know, before I can really approve significant funding plan for it in the future, I'd like to get a better grasp on current and future projected demand needs and try to get a little bit better data. I know it's an imperfect science. That being said, I'd like to make sure that we discuss, the 4 of us discuss mitigation. It was part of the presentation here tonight. I'm not insistent that this project needs to mitigate. I do see it as an essential public service. in a way, I see it just as a cost driver for developing this project. I think one way to look at it is that the people that are providing this service are sort of here anyways in one way, shape, or form. I don't have a super strong opinion here, but I want to make sure the four of us discuss it and take everyone's temperature on, should it be fully mitigated, should it be partially mitigated, should it be waived? So I ask each of you that question.
Is that something we need to talk about now? I know you're asking for it now, but I'm
It's
not.
regarding, yeah, Section 5 addresses mitigation, and so if council would like a statement that mitigation is waived or mitigation is required, or the mitigation off of the 505 fund is sufficient, is what's written right now, that would need your direction tonight. I will tell you, no matter which way you do this, there's got to be housing units created to make this project work, fundamentally. Housing stability is key for people in this particular industry. And so whatever this ordinance says, I think you're going to be building housing or acquiring housing regardless in order to make this facility run. So I just want to give you that flavor of what I see as from a program management standpoint. We're going to have a bigger problem finding staff than we are going to be finding kids.
The only place I want to be careful here is I don't want to link this to 505 fund housing specifically, because if the employees here don't end up being City of Aspen employees for one reason or another, I think that adds complexity. So, part of why I really wanted to understand what Glenn presented on the credits was because I was a bit concerned about that. Is like, what if we partner with a private enterprise to operate this facility, or several private enterprises, and they're not City of Aspen employees? Then I don't like that relationship there. So again, I'm really open to talking about a waiver, either partial or full, but I don't want to rely on 505 housing to offset the mitigation requirements if deemed necessary.
So you would be suggesting a change in section 6?
What section? Section 5.
Section 5 is the audit, baseline of 24 on audit.
Yeah.
And then section 6 talks about city council grants flexibility in meeting affordable housing mitigation.
I guess it's both.
And your suggestion here is, number one, not 505 funds, and number two, waiving mitigation or partial mitigation?
I'm not sure I have a suggestion. I think I'd welcome the discussion and everyone else's thoughts. I guess I feel like it warrants either partial or full mitigation. I definitely strong opinion that it should not be tied to 505. I sort of hate the concept of these ongoing audits every 5 years. I have some personal experience with that, and it's a weird concept that I'm not sure is so necessary for this facility, but that's a tertiary thing. More importantly, let's talk about 505 stuff, and let's talk about waiver or partial waiver or no waiver of the mitigation requirements.
All right. Any other comments or questions? Okay. FTE parking. All right. Before we get to those items and a motion that includes what we want to include in that motion, I'll make a few comments. Throughout this project's process, I have continually said that I don't really think that it's in the right place. I have some concerns about the demand as well as the staffing, but this is the best proposal that we have in front of us when it comes to addressing this issue. I also know that we have a missing fifth of our council who is very supportive of this project. So because this is entitlements and not construction, I'm willing to support this evening. I do it with caution. I think everybody should be aware as we move forward in the future that there is still some more analysis and to be done before this is actually built. I had two questions. One, I didn't see a recap of the survey information from Burlingame residents. Is it possible for you to summarize what you did hear from any of the outreach that we got from Burlingame residents? That was my first one. And then my second question would be about the usage of this building. I know that childcare facilities have some regulations around what can be done in the building. So my question kind of is, if we get this project going and we get it built, and if there is an issue with occupancy, staffing, and the like, what is our ability to utilize the building in another way? It can still be childcare, but maybe for an older age group. Is that something that's prohibited in a facility like this?
So I would suggest to you that the facilities must be smaller for younger folks. So what would just happen is your rooms actually wouldn't meet the ratio requirements for older children, potentially. So like if you said after school as an example.
Right.
That those ratios are very different, but the space also grows with that ratio. So I don't believe it precludes any, the building will have components that are not usable for that older age group. For example, bathrooms that are designed for younger children. But it would most likely be some kind of zoning review required, just to assure once there's clarity on that programming request, that it still complies with the underlying zoning for the parcel. Because childcare is a conditional use, so how far we take the definition of childcare is something that would be called into question. Do you have anything to add?
No, I think that's right. The land use code doesn't talk about age groups of children and what's appropriate of space, but I do know that there's requirements kind of in state guidelines for those kinds of things. And again, I think as we get closer and there's an understanding of the demands and how the space is used, if there's something that deviates significantly or raises questions about whether or not this would still count as an early childhood education center, sort of contrary to this approval or kind of the original Burlingame approval, I think we could have those conversations. And if it crossed a boundary where we felt like we needed additional sort of land use approvals to memorialize that, we could do that. But kind of off the top of my head, it seems like some minimal use for other child care needs beyond what's being described here. I don't know that would necessitate land use action unless it somehow crossed some thresholds with Colorado guidelines.
Okay. Thank you. Was there any opportunity, do you have any summary words about Burlingame resident input? Thanks, Jen.
There was a number of ways that we worked on outreach to the community. We had a number of open houses at Burlingame proper, at City Hall. We also did an Aspen Community Voice survey. A lot of that information is summarized on Aspen Community Voice, but generally speaking, I'd say, some people were very supportive of having the child care center there. Some people had questions about parking and traffic. That seems to be a recurring theme in Burlingame. Ability to staff, something that was brought up tonight, was also raised. And then the ability to prioritize neighborhood children to attend locally the Burlingame Child Care Center. So, again, those were a mix of comments, but.
That's great. That's kind of, yeah, that's all I needed to hear. I just didn't know if there was anything glaring out there that we got letters from any of the HOAs or anything like that, that said
No, we haven't gotten anything
in
like that.
opposition. Okay.
But, you know, you had these range of comments, I'd say.
Okay, thank you for that. Council, as we're moving towards a potential motion here, the things that need to be decided for the motion, we need some direction on the parking, and we need some direction on the FTE mitigation. So, first, I'll just start by saying, how do we feel about the 5 on-street parking spots? You heard some concerns around that. You also heard from our team leader that that is not a deal breaker in any sense of the word, so there might be valid concern there with the trail running next to those parking spots. Anybody?
I totally respect the concern of the parking spots next to the trail. I don't think it's a huge concern, but I respect it. I think we'd probably be fine just eliminating those 5 spots and leaving the phased parking approach. And the reason I say that is because the only people that are really going to be parking there are the staff. Everyone else just drops off and leaves, or picks up and leaves. And so what's more important are the pickup and drop-off spots, which I think there are like 18 dedicated to, if I remember what was shown on that slide, which seems sufficient to me. So I would propose, let's get rid of the 5 on-street parking. Let's allow the phased parking approach. If they need the additional parking, it's sort of there as part of the plat for a future phase later.
John, how do you feel about it?
I'm basing my comments on what Glenn shared with us. It seems like it doesn't have to be decided now. Can't we wait until they come back? And I mean, none of it's a deal breaker to me.
On that. I do think that based on the language that's in the ordinance as written, the ordinance as written sort of eliminates the 5 on-street parking spaces and gives description that the parking will not be done in a phase, the on-site will not be done in a phased manner. It'll be done all at one time. So if council decides to do that differently, you do need to make, on the phased piece, we do need to change that if there's majority agreement with that. Right now, it's written no on-street parking and the parking being done in all at one time on-site.
And that's staff's recommendation?
It is.
That's the direction I'd like to go then.
Which is to eliminate the 5 and maintain phased?
Yep.
No, not phased, 41 at one time.
It's fine with me too. I don't
Yeah,
know.
this is fine with me. Yeah.
And if I may, Jeff Barnhill, generally, engineering might support this if there was good reason. I just don't think there was a reason. That's why they didn't support it. So I don't really see it as being a huge deal.
Okay, so the ordinance is written, it has it for not phased, 41 spots to go in, but eliminating the 5 on-street, okay? All right, the FTE discussion and mitigation. I can understand and agree unless there's something that we should maybe know about the 505 fund here. I think Bill makes a good point about we don't really know what the arrangement's gonna be with those staff members, so putting them in city-funded housing could be problematic in the future unless there's some other take on that, I don't know.
Respectfully, using the 505 housing as mitigation was a political solution. It doesn't actually generate new housing. And so my views very strongly in this area is we actually need to generate housing units to create stability for employers within this building. So it's really, if you need a response from me, I would suggest that you waive it, but you set council direction to mitigate a certain percent as part of the capital project, or that you put in a partial requirement on the project. Sorry, I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant. This is a little awkward. I apologize, Alan.
Well, the city is the applicant.
Yes, but still, it's one
alright.
of those odd hats I'm wearing at the moment.
So in the interest of advancing this conversation, given I'm the one who brought it up, I would propose eliminating all reference to 505 fund in here, and I would propose a 50% waiver of the mitigation requirements. Let that serve as a starting point for the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, for me, elimination of 505 is fine. I do agree with Sarah. Housing's gonna need to be built, and I don't know, I'm trying to wrap my head around it, but whatever needs to be done to do that and is fair for the applicant, the city, on this one makes the most sense for me.
Same.
Okay.
And just for some clarity, so this number here, the 15.6, is 24 FTEs mitigated at 65%. So you guys would like that to be 24 FTEs mitigated at 50%, so 12 FTEs, correct?
No, I was,
He was
that-
talking about half in the
half of the
15.6.
required. So half of 15.6.
7.8.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was suggesting as a starting point for the conversation. Maybe an ending point.
Good luck. Ben, did you have some input?
I was just gonna say, I think this is a really typical conversation for, projects that have the essential public facilities label, particularly when we have a sort of project that's gonna be happening sometime in the future, and we're a little bit unsure of the use and who's gonna be in, like, these are pretty typical conversations. I would say that if you were to do what you just did, sort of setting a mitigation requirement, and then also, with the language that's in section 6 about flexibility, and providing through sort of any of the means that are sort of prescribed by the land use code, I think that would give appropriate direction to our future selves about the city's intention in meeting the mitigation requirements for these employees. So I think those two things, actually three things: 50%, that's clear. Scratching the reference to the 505 fund, that's clear. And then I would just say that the other flexibility, that the flexibility of how the land use code allows for mitigation would seem to give the city flexibility to generate actual units whenever this project became a reality.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, one other item as applicant we'd like to request is a conversation on the vesting.
10 years was the request.
There was the request, the ordinance currently reads 5
Oh, the ordinance is 5 at this time? Okay.
in section 9.
Yes,
Yeah, I'm
following
good with 10.
P&Z recommendation.
Should be 10.
Okay,
10.
okay. Oh, yes, sir.
I'd like to go back to the housing just for a moment, in that I understand that section 3 is going to identify the 50% requirement. I think there should be a cross-reference in section 5 of the ordinance to section 3, because the baseline is 24 FTEs, but I think there should be a sentence added that says that the requirement of 50% of the FTEs to be mitigated in section 3, so they tie together, so there's no question in the future that the mitigation is the 50% of the employees generated rather than the 24 FTEs in section 5.
And an easier way to say that would be that 24 FTEs are mitigated at 33%.
Jeff, would you prefer to thoughtfully make these changes without pressure and come back, or do you want to do it on the fly? I don't see a rush to approve this tonight from my perspective, so.
I think we've got clear direction and understand councils, and we can do some wordsmithing, if that's okay with the city attorney's office. I feel like the direction that's been given has been clear. If you're comfortable with amending that.
Yeah, I think you can amend it here tonight. I believe you could pass it by motion tonight with the direction to amend it pursuant to what you've discussed here tonight, and authorize staff to make those changes. Tori would obviously be the person that signs off on the final ordinance, but I think you can move forward tonight with direction to staff to make those amendments. It's up to you. If you'd like to see the hard written copy, we can set it on the next hearing for passage. Again, you've had 2 hearings on it, so it would be simple at that point. It's up to you.
Okay. All right, we're gonna take a stab at it tonight then. If we can get a motion with everything included.
I will make a motion to approve ordinance number 6, series of 2024, the Burlingame Early Childhood Education Center, pursuant to the changes we've made at the table tonight.
And for, go ahead. I would just like to clarify, and you can confirm if this is your understanding. So the First Amendment would be that instead of a 5-year vesting period, it be amended to reflect a 10-year vesting period. The Second Amendment would be Section 5 is amended to reflect that council is waiving mitigation of up to 50%, and reference to mitigation through the use of the 505 fund shall be stricken. Additional amendments will be made to Section 3 to reflect the waiver of mitigation. Is that sort of to 33%? I think Sarah said it well.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
I don't know about that. Did you have any?
I'll second that motion.
Motion is second. Further discussion? Further questions? All right, we have a motion and a second. Could we please have a roll call vote for ordinance number 6 as amended?
Counselor Doyle?
Yes.
Counselor Guth?
Yes.
Counselor Rose?
Yes.
Mayor Tory?
Yes. Thank you, guys. Very thorough.
Yeah.
And if Cody, Cody's not still on. All right, well, tell Cody I said hi, please.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Can we have a roll call vote for adjournment, please?
Counselor Doyle?
Yes.
Counselor Guth?
Yes.
Counselor Rose?
Yes.
Mayor Tory?
Yes. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Wonderful week.
Okay.
Probably, it's getting to be that season where we will see each other a lot more in town.
Oh, yeah. I walk by those benches all the time.